For entertainment purposes only. And if you want true legal advice, contact your own lawyer.
Advertisement caused the Sandy Hook killings. Now, they have to connect those dots. How they're ever going to be able to prove because this gunman watched a video game, he therefore went and did this heinous act, and that was the sole cause of it, is, in my opinion, going to be very difficult to overcome for the Sandy Hook victims' attorneys.
It's going to be very difficult. Look, they're trying to take the page out of the big tobacco lawsuit playbooks. And the thing that the plaintiffs had in big tobacco was, in addition to suing over advertising and marketing, maybe to young kids and talking about marketing and things like that, they also had medical statistics. They had background to say, and cigarette use causes this. They had the cause and effect relationship. And that is where it's going to be difficult here, is, like you said, is to show the cause and effect relationship. They can show cause and effect from guns kill people. That's easy.
Well, the hard
part
is guns don't kill. Some people argue guns don't kill people.
The gun can be used to kill people. The gun is a tool that can take a life. It's a weapon.
Right.
The hard part is going to be showing the causal link between the advertising and the taking of a life. That's where it's going to be difficult. But here's the thing. When you file lawsuits like this, do you always file a lawsuit? And do plaintiffs always engage in this because they want to win at trial, or do they do it because they want to make a case that'll make it past summary judgment and all that will force things into a settlement? Because let's face it, let's say, for the sake of arguments, that the plaintiffs only had a 30% chance of winning. Right? Let's say they only had a 30% chance of winning. As a defendant, I could see a gun manufacturer saying, well, we got a 70% chance of winning. They only have a 30% chance, but that's still too much of a risk I'm willing to take, because we get a jury out there, and a jury's going to see pictures of how many victims, all under the age of 8 years old, and they're going to say somebody's got to pay. They're going to see a bank ledger that says, and the gun manufacturers make how many billions of dollars?
If that comes in, that might not come in.
Yeah, well, because it's advertising and revenue and what motivates the advertising and how things go. And if they didn't do the advertising, they wouldn't make this much money is going to be the argument. I see a gun manufacturer saving even 30%, even if it's less than 50%. It's too much of a risk we want to take. We'll settle.
I think there are two other factors that probably should come into play. One, when a city is overrun by death, and they obviously can't do anything about it, somebody says, I have to at least make it look like I'm doing something. It's the equivalent of when the boss walks in, what's the old expression, behinds and elbows, that's what they want to see. I think this is the equivalent of the city attorney going, look, I'm trying to do something. But what's fascinating is that when you calculate it out by 1,000 people, deaths per 1,000 by gun, Baltimore isn't even it's barely in the top 5 in the country. The worst city is East St. Louis, Chester, Pennsylvania, St. Louis, Missouri, Gary, Indiana, Baltimore, and Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
Interesting.
Yeah,
per capita.
Yeah, that's what it's calculated per 1,000.
Right.
However, Baltimore, as you said, had 342.
Right.
And Chicago, everybody thinks is the murder capital, but it's not. Detroit's way up there, 268. Baton Rouge. But, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of deaths, way too many. We all agree with that.
You know what would be interesting is if you start to see these the serial killers that have used these guns, and you look at their Facebook pages and you see them with their guns all proud, and you can get pictures of that, and you can show that they're even advertising and on social media with their gun. And
so you mean the mass murderers, the school shooters, and people like that pose with their guns? Right?
That would be something that potentially would be in such a jury trial.
Well, here's the issue, and I'm going to take issue with Todd's argument here, which is like we like to do. The thing, Todd, that you have to remember is, and by the way, I probably don't even, I'm getting so old I forgot my argument, but I think I'm gonna remember it in a couple of seconds. It was a dang good argument, Todd.
A fleeting argument.
I just completely lost it. So you were talking about what was it again?
I was talking about how if you file a lawsuit, it's not just whether or not you're going to win at trial.
I got the answer.
It's not the gun.
Yeah, here's the issue is I don't think they're going to do that on this case. On many cases, people do because this is the precedent-setting case. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen is if they give in this time, if they open the door, it's gonna fly open. It tells you right now with the city of Baltimore what they've already said. If Sandy Hook wins, we're opening the floodgates and we're going to go after the gun manufacturers. Secondly, I say if the gun manufacturers settle, it's going to open the door for the Baltimores to sue. Here's one other point I want to make. And again, we're politically neutral here, but I'm going to lay this point out. Does the city of Baltimore now sue the record labels?
Well,
think about it.
That's an interesting point, because if the advertising, if you're saying that the advertising message in a gun, and I'm going to read some of the slogans and some of the ads in just a second, but if you're saying that is what leads to the violence by use of the instrument, then the next question is, well, what about the music that people listen to where the lyrics say the same?
Exactly right. So
that's almost even more a call to action.
Arguably, it is.
No, it is a call. They say it in a lot of these songs. Talk about shootings and killings and popping and stuff like that. So does the manufacturer, do the record labels get sued, and or the singers that sing about it? In my opinion, as a lawyer, I'm thinking, okay, if you win this case here, all right, I'm going to start suing the record labels, right?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yeah, but this case is about advertisement. This is a marketing campaign by the the gun manufacturers. And there's a First Amendment right in there, too. We had a case a couple years ago where somebody had put something that was pretty, risky or racy or something on the outside of their business, but they used it as a marketing tool, and they were told to remove it, and they took it up on appeal, and they won because it was the First Amendment right.
Yeah.
But guess what? You're right, free speech and singing. But if this hits here, this is more advertising, and you don't think the record labels aren't pushing that violence also? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
And this is what the advertising we're talking about. And I know we got to go here in just a second, but so for one, Bushmaster, they have their AR-15. The tagline was "Consider your man card reissued." Holding that. I think the one that's maybe the most egregious is from Mattel, the toy maker, and it shows a young boy with an M16, and obviously this is a little older.
Kid.
What year was that? Probably
this is probably in the 60s, but it says, if you think this gun looks great, wait till you hear it, and it's a toy M16. Now, if that kind of advertising is being promulgated, that could be problematic.
All I got to know is I chewed on candy cigarettes when I was in the 70s, and I lived and survived.
Stop whining. Are you serious?
You're listening to Radio Law Talk. And now back to the show.
Remember, this is an important day for you. Thanksgiving's coming up. Listen to what we have to say and be prepared to talk to everybody at the dinner table about what Radio Law Talk says during the Thanksgiving break. And we have Scott on the line that wants to talk a little more about the Remington case and about gun violence and the lawsuits against gun manufacturers. Scott, welcome.
Thank you, guys. I love your show. I listen to it every Saturday.
Good.
But I wanted to just say, I'm from Stockton, so you know why I have to be a responsible gun owner.
Right.
But I was thinking about advertising, and these car manufacturers are making these cars that go 160, 200 miles an hour, and they advertise horsepower. And I'm wondering at what point, knowing that about 26% of the deaths on the road are from speeding, is that going to become an issue where people can sue the car manufacturers? And I'll let you respond on the radio. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. Hey, good. Scott, that's an excellent point. And I think one of the issues there is, and I think Scott brought up a good point, but I would argue about the manufacturers of vehicles is they're generally not allegedly advertising of violence. Even though, yes, you're right, Scott, it's speed, and every teenager likes speed and is driving a nice fast Camaro or a
Dodge Demon.
Demon. Yeah, we love that. And Cal, when we grew up, we liked to drive those fast cars. But that's an argument. But I still think, Scott, my best argument by far is the record labels. They're promoting it more than guns, more than cars, more than anything. They're promoting this violence. Again, We're neutral here on Radio Law Talk, but think about it. If it's going to start there with the guns, it should do the slippery slope right into that.
I'd like to say that cars are not inherently dangerous. There would not be any kind of a strict liability for a car. Cars are operated by humans. For the most part, although now that's starting to change. But it's a human behind the car that is doing the speeding. So that, I think, insulates the automobile industry. Plus, the automobile industry is not marketing.
The same argument people make about guns.
Yeah, that's what they're arguing about guns.
There has never been an AR-15 under its own volition that just floated in and it was always somebody pulling the trigger.
Well, or dropping the gun.
Yeah,
we saw in San Francisco.
Well, that's true.
Dropped.
But to Fred's point about automobiles are not inherently dangerous.
No, well, it's her point.
Or not inherently used for violence.
Right.
Okay. And that the ads are not promoting violence or anything like that when it comes to vehicles, I would say, well neither were the ads for cigarettes and tobacco. They were promoting enjoyment, cool, smooth, whatever. But it still had, I think it raises a point. What we're going to see here, in my opinion, is we hear about this idea of slippery slope. I don't know if people really understand what that means. It's the idea that if you can imagine an argument sitting at the top of an incline where, like a snowball, where if you push it over, it starts to go downhill and pick up speed, an argument that has a slippery slope, it is, as it starts to go downhill, how far can it go? How much can it pick up in terms of liability and what industries can be sued? And I think you're going to find that tested. To your point about lyrics, Fred, I want to point out something. This happened. Charlton Heston gave a speech to Harvard University at graduation commencement. And he was talking about, this was back in the 90s, and he was talking about the dangerous aspects of being politically correct and all that, how it can stifle free speech and stuff. And he talked about an experience he had where he found out that Time Warner was promoting an album. They had an artist named Ice-T underneath on their record label, and he had a song called Cop Killer that was booming up the charts and making a lot of money. Well, because Charlton Heston owned some shares of stock, he went to the stockholders meeting, and he read the lyrics to Cop Killer, including, this is just one little portion, quote, this is the lyrics from the song, this is to your point, Fred, quote, I got my 12-gauge sawed off, I got my headlights turned off, I'm about to bust some shots off, I'm going to dust some cops off. Now, I don't know how you can make an argument that is not a call to action or glorifying that kind of violence. That, to me, is far more egregious than any ad, even though I've seen some ads that are real head-scratchers for guns. That, to me, is far more egregious than that, and that song was selling millions. So to your point, I agree with that. I think that on this slippery slope, how many folks are going to be scooped up and brought into lawsuits that are promoting violence, Denise?
Well, the interesting thing is who's going to be the plaintiff. That potentially could be someone who is in a gang and has been glorifying this type of language and then does something bad. And they could potentially be a plaintiff and sue the record label.
Because they got shot.
Because they shot someone.
That's
right. You mean a defendant or a plaintiff?
That could be a potential plaintiff.
Oh, they're saying, you made me do it.
Oh. The ad made me do it. The devil made me do it argument.
Yes.
Like the people that smoked all their life and they smoked tobacco, they knew all that, and they become the plaintiffs to sue the tobacco company.
I tell you right now, Cal, you and I were overweight right now. It's because the candy cigarettes
killed us both
that you and I were chewing on that our dads gave us.
That's right.
Made us love sugar and eat so much. I'm overweight because of that.
Those are the things that you used to blow, and it would have a puff that looked like smoke, right?
Did.
I had those. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I'm just thinking of the old Chesterfield ads where they had a doctor in a lab coat and it said "Doctor recommended Chesterfield cigarettes."
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Oh, come on. The Marlboro Man was the biggest stuff.
That goes way back.
Yeah.
In fairness, and to be complete about this story with the lyrics there, after Charlton Heston read that at the shareholders meeting shortly thereafter, Time Warner dropped Ice-T as an artist on their record label, and they took corrective measures for that. But That ain't the only song that was out there.
Guess what?
Those lyrics are all over the place.
Now it's the opposite. They'll probably want to add them if they say that.
Oh, yeah,
Because
yeah.
There's so many people that don't like
Isn't
cops.
this the
out
same
there.
Ice-T that's now the actor in the cop drama?
Yes.
It is.
Well,
It is.
ironically, how ironic is that, right?
All I got to say, guess what?
He turned coat, right? He's a turncoat.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right
Because
now,
now he's a cop.
this is something we're going to be following for a long time that will keep Radio Law Talk on the air because this Remington case is just the beginning.
I saw a commercial for a law firm the other day, and they say, we only do this specific kind of case. It's how prolific it is, has to do with a certain disease, mesothelioma, whatever. We only do this, and we've got offices all over the country, and I wouldn't be surprised if you found law firms that we only do this kind of case with regard to gun lawsuits going forward and trying to take on these type of arguments. That is how big I think it can get.
Well, that's what's happened with a lot of these fires, too,
Yeah.
in the western United States. And I not to get into my personal detail, I'm like, go for it, guys. I'm going to be handling all the other type of personal injury cases because you're too busy dealing with that.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really touch those fire cases. But anyway, let's move on to Jesse Smollett.
Go to the website, radiolawtalk.com. That's radiolawtalk.com.